The muffled sounds from the guest room weren't just a late-night argument. They were the nails being hammered into the coffin of my entire existence. I stood there, hand hovering over the doorknob, every nerve screaming for me to turn away, to unhear what I was hearing. But a darker, more perverse part of me, the part that had been slowly suffocating under layers of unspoken doubts, demanded I push. What I saw next wasn't just my husband, Mark, entangled with another woman. It was my best friend, Sarah, their bodies a horrifying mosaic of betrayal under the dim light. My breath caught, a silent scream trapped in my throat, as the world I meticulously built shattered around me. The most terrifying part wasn't their infidelity. It was the chilling, almost primal calm that settled over me, a terrifying emptiness that whispered promises of an equally devastating, forbidden revenge. People talk about heartbreak like a sudden, sharp pain, but this was different. It was a slow-motion avalanche, burying me under tons of emotional debris. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even move from the doorway for what felt like an eternity. Mark and Sarah, oblivious, continued their sordid dance, their hushed whispers and soft moans weaving a sickening lullaby of deceit. When I finally retreated, it wasn't out of shock or sadness, but a cold, calculated fury. My legs carried me back to my own bed, where I lay perfectly still, eyes wide open in the dark, the image of their intertwined bodies burned behind my eyelids. The silence of the house pressed in, amplifying the thunder of my own blood in my ears, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life as I knew it was over. This isn't one of those easy stories where the protagonist walks away gracefully. This is messy. This is raw. This is what happens when two people you trusted more than life itself carve a hole through your soul. What followed that night wasn't just a confrontation. It was a descent into a psychological war, a battle fought not with words, but with insidious silences and piercing glances. If you've ever felt the absolute, crushing weight of betrayal, the kind that makes you question everything you thought was real, then you know this feeling. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to reveal might make you question the very definition of loyalty and how far someone will go to reclaim a piece of themselves. My name is Amelia. I'm 31, a freelance graphic designer, and I live in a quiet suburban house that now feels like a cage. Mark and I had been together for 10 years, married for 5. We had the perfect life, or so I thought. We met in college, young and full of dreams, building our future brick by brick. He was my rock, my confidant, the one person I believed would always be by my side. Sarah, my best friend since kindergarten, was practically family. She was the one I called for every crisis, every triumph, every mundane detail of my day. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, stood by my side as I promised forever. Their betrayal wasn't just a stab in the back, it was a complete amputation of my emotional foundation. Before that night, my biggest concern was choosing the right shade of paint for the living room or hitting a deadline for a client. My world was small, comfortable, and utterly predictable. The idea of infidelity was something I saw on TV, a distant tragedy that couldn't possibly touch my idyllic existence. We had always been so careful, so committed, or so I believed. Mark was charming, a bit aloof at times, but always attentive to me. Sarah was vivacious, sometimes a little too flirtatious, but I dismissed it as her personality, never a threat. The blindness was almost comical in hindsight, a tragic play where I was the only one unaware of the looming catastrophe, dancing on the edge of a cliff, completely oblivious. The morning after, the air in the house was thick with unspoken dread. Mark walked into the kitchen, his eyes bloodshot, a feigned casualness in his movements that screamed guilt. He mumbled something about a late night, a work crisis. I watched him, my face a mask of polite indifference, pouring coffee, buttering toast, every action a conscious effort to keep my trembling hands steady. Sarah, miraculously, wasn't there. He assumed I hadn't seen anything, and that assumption was a poison, seeping into every corner of my mind. It was a new level of insult, that he thought me so naive, so blind, that I could miss such a glaring, soul-crushing violation. The silence between us was deafening, a precursor to the storm. I confronted him later that day, not with a scream, but with a chilling calm that unnerved even me. "Sarah," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, "was in the guest room last night." His face went ashen, all pretense crumbling in an instant. The denials came first, a torrent of desperate lies, then the pathetic apologies, the justifications that made my stomach churn. It was a mistake, Amelia, a moment of weakness. It meant nothing. But I knew. I knew the intimate whispers, the ease of their touch. It meant everything. It meant they had been building this secret world behind my back, brick by brick, while I was blissfully unaware, trusting them both implicitly. The bitterness was a physical taste on my tongue. The betrayal wasn't just Mark's. It was Sarah's too, a double-edged sword twisting in my gut. How could my best friend, the person who knew all my vulnerabilities, my deepest hopes, my most intimate fears, do this? It was a betrayal of sisterhood, of decades of shared laughter and tears, reduced to a cheap thrill in my own home. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the image of Sarah, my confidant, with Sarah, the woman in my husband's bed. The cognitive dissonance was a form of torture, a constant loop of happy memories colliding with the brutal reality, each collision tearing a new fissure in my sanity. I felt like a foolish, discarded prop in their twisted drama. The following weeks were a blur of numb existence. Mark moved out, though not without a pathetic attempt to win me back, which I met with cold disdain. Sarah tried to call to explain, her messages filling my inbox with hollow apologies I never bothered to read. I cut them both out, surgically removing them from my life, but the wounds festered, refusing to heal. I stopped eating, sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, haunted by the images, the sounds, the overwhelming sense of being utterly, completely alone. The house, once a sanctuary, felt hollow, echoing with ghosts of a happiness that never truly existed. It was in this abyss of despair that a dangerous seed began to sprout. Loneliness is a peculiar beast. It doesn't just make you sad, it strips you bare, exposes your rawest nerves, and whispers tempting, forbidden solutions. I wasn't looking for love anymore. I was looking for a weapon, a way to inflict a wound as deep as the one I carried. The desire for revenge was a cold fire in my veins, burning away the last vestiges of my old self. I wanted them to hurt, to feel a fraction of the agony they had so casually bestowed upon me. The idea started as a fleeting, dark thought, a fleeting fantasy of striking back. But the more I nursed my pain, the more that fantasy solidified, taking on a terrifyingly tangible form, a whisper of an eye for an eye. Mark had a younger brother, David. David was different. Quiet, intense, with eyes that seemed to see right through your carefully constructed facades. He was the black sheep of the family, a struggling musician, often overlooked, always in Mark's shadow. I had always felt a strange kinship with him, a quiet understanding that bypassed words. He was always kind, always respectful, unlike his brazen older brother. After the divorce papers were filed, David was one of the few people who reached out, not with platitudes, but with genuine concern. He called, he checked in, he offered to help me move Mark's things, a silent ally in my solitary war. He understood hurt in a way Mark never could. Our conversations started innocently enough. He'd come over for coffee, sometimes bringing his guitar, playing melancholic tunes that resonated with my fractured soul. We talked for hours, about life, about dreams, about the pain of being unseen. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't even with Sarah. He listened, truly listened, without judgment, without pity, just a shared sense of profound understanding. He knew about Mark's infidelity, of course. The family gossip network was swift and ruthless. His presence was a balm, a quiet anchor in the stormy seas of my grief and rage. But underneath that calm, a dangerous undercurrent began to pull, a silent, unspoken acknowledgement of a growing, illicit connection. I remember the night it shifted. We were sitting on the couch, the lights dim, his guitar resting against the wall. I had been recounting some particularly painful memory, and a tear had slipped down my cheek. Without a word, he reached out, his thumb gently wiping it away. The touch was electric, not just comforting, but charged with an undeniable tension. My breath hitched. He didn't pull away. His gaze held mine, deep and searching, and in his eyes I saw not pity but something else, a reflection of my own yearning, my own unspoken desire for connection, for someone to see me, truly see me, beyond the shattered pieces of my marriage. It was a turning point, a precipice we both stood on. The air thickened with unspoken words. The unspoken question hanging between us was palpable, almost suffocating. My mind screamed at me to pull away, to remember whose brother he was, to remember the chasm of wrongness that lay before us. But my heart, battered and bruised, yearned for something, anything, to fill the gaping void. His hand moved from my cheek to my jawline, his fingers tracing the curve of my chin, sending shivers down my spine. The revenge was a whisper in the back of my mind, a dark siren song, but more than that, there was a desperate, almost primal need for connection, for someone to witness my pain and offer solace, even if that solace was forbidden. And then he leaned in, slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving mine, as if seeking permission or perhaps simply confirming my own unspoken desire. The first kiss was soft, tentative, a question. My response was a desperate answer, a hungry embrace of the warmth I had been deprived of for so long. It wasn't just physical. It was a collision of broken pieces, two souls finding a dangerous comfort in each other's wreckage. The taste of rebellion, of forbidden fruit, was intoxicating. I was drowning, and he was the only anchor I had, even if that anchor was pulling me deeper into troubled waters. The world outside that living room ceased to exist. I wish I could say it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness fueled by pain and anger. But it wasn't. It became our secret, a dangerous dance performed in the shadows of Mark's betrayal. Every stolen glance, every hushed conversation, every late-night visit deepened the entanglement. The guilt was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I wore everywhere. How could I do this? How could I betray Mark in this way, even after his own egregious actions? But the thought of stopping, of losing that illicit warmth, that understanding, was more terrifying than the guilt itself. It was a twisted form of survival, a desperate grasp at feeling anything other than utter desolation. Our affair was a delicate, precarious structure, built on the shifting sands of betrayal and desperate longing. We knew the consequences if anyone found out, especially Mark. The explosion would be catastrophic, tearing apart what little family stability remained. But the risk, the thrill of walking that razor's edge, only intensified the connection. It was an addiction, a rush of adrenaline mixed with genuine, albeit complicated, affection. David saw me, truly saw me, not as Mark's wife, but as Amelia, a woman deeply hurt, desperately seeking solace. And I, in turn, saw him, the sensitive, misunderstood artist, yearning for recognition outside his brother's shadow. Our connection was a strange fusion of spite and genuine tenderness. The fear was constant, a cold knot in my stomach. Every phone call from an unknown number, every unexpected knock at the door, sent a jolt of panic through me. What if someone saw us? What if Mark found out? The revenge, initially a powerful motivator, began to morph into something more complex, something I couldn't quite define. Was it still just about hurting Mark? Or was I genuinely falling for David, his quiet strength, his gentle understanding? The lines blurred, twisted into an intricate web of emotion that defied easy categorization. I was playing with fire, and the flames were dangerously close to consuming me entirely, burning away my last shreds of morality. There were moments of intense joy, flashes of genuine happiness, when I was with David. Moments where I could almost forget the circumstances, the tangled web of deceit that brought us together. We'd laugh, we'd talk for hours, we'd share silent understandings that felt more profound than any conversation I ever had with Mark. But then the darkness would creep back in, the shadow of Mark's face, the image of Sarah, the crushing weight of my own complicity. I'd look at David, and sometimes, for a fleeting second, I'd see Mark in his eyes, a phantom limb of my past reaching out, reminding me of the irreversible damage I was inflicting on everyone involved. The secrecy became a burden, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I couldn't share my life with anyone anymore, not truly. My friends, my family, they saw a woman slowly recovering from a devastating divorce, not a woman entangled in a forbidden affair with her ex-husband's brother. The lies piled up, small white lies blossoming into a sprawling forest of deceit. I felt isolated, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, longing for a release I didn't know how to achieve. The thrill was fading, replaced by a dull ache of despair, and the terrifying realization that I was sinking deeper into a quagmire of my own creation. I started having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams where Mark and Sarah would appear, their faces twisted in grotesque grins, pointing fingers, their laughter echoing in a cavernous space. Sometimes David would be there too, his face obscured, a silent participant in the horror. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the shame and fear a suffocating presence in my darkened room. I knew deep down that this couldn't last. This reckless pursuit of vengeance and fleeting connection was eating away at me, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell of the woman I once was. The price of my revenge was becoming too high, costing me my sanity, my soul. One night, as David held me close, I realized something truly terrifying. I wasn't just hurting Mark and Sarah anymore. I was hurting myself. I was perpetuating a cycle of pain, becoming the very thing I despised, someone who sought solace in forbidden places, someone who contributed to the wreckage instead of rebuilding. His touch, once a comfort, now felt heavy, laden with the weight of our shared secret, our mutual complicity. The tenderness was still there, yes, but it was tainted, shadowed by the darkness of our origins. The warmth I sought was now a burning ember, threatening to engulf everything good I had left. I started pulling away, subtly at first, then more overtly. David noticed, of course. His quiet eyes, always so perceptive, registered the change. He asked me what was wrong, his voice laced with concern, a raw vulnerability that almost broke my resolve. How could I tell him? How could I confess that the very act of seeking comfort with him had now become another source of my torment? The truth was too ugly, too complicated, too wrapped in layers of anger and self-loathing. I wanted to escape, not just from David, but from the person I had become, the twisted reflections staring back at me from every mirrored surface. This isn't a story with a neat, happy ending, because life rarely is. I'm still in the middle of it, wrestling with the consequences of my choices. David and I haven't officially ended things, but the unspoken distance between us grows with each passing day. The revenge felt sweet for a while, a fleeting moment of triumph, but it left a bitter aftertaste, a hollowness that no illicit connection could ever fill. I learned the hard way that seeking comfort in the wrong places, even out of justified anger, only digs a deeper grave for your own peace of mind. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just from Mark and Sarah. It was the betrayal of myself, of my own moral compass. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because someone out there, perhaps you, is teetering on the edge of a similar abyss. Maybe you've been hurt so deeply that the idea of burning it all down seems like the only option. Maybe you're trapped in a secret, a relationship, or a cycle of vengeance that's slowly consuming you. Whatever your darkness, whatever secret you carry, please understand this. While revenge might offer a momentary thrill, it often costs you more than you could ever imagine. It might feel like control, but it's a cage slowly closing in. My journey out of this darkness is just beginning, fraught with uncertainty and the heavy weight of regret. But one thing is clear: silence is a killer. Keeping these secrets, especially the ones that gnaw at your soul, will only isolate you further. I don't know what the future holds for me, for David, or for the fractured remains of my life. But I know that speaking this truth, even to a faceless audience, is the first painful step towards healing, towards reclaiming myself. If you've ever felt like you were caught in a trap of your own making, please share your story, even if it's just a snippet. I am far from healed, far from whole, but I am no longer silent. I am no longer allowing the shame to dictate my existence. The road ahead is long, filled with difficult conversations and even more painful truths to confront. But I believe, now more than ever, that true strength comes from facing your demons, not hiding them. So if you're out there wrestling with your own demons, your own hidden truths, know that you are not alone. And if this story has resonated with you, even in the smallest way, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Let's create a space where these difficult, messy truths can finally see the light.